Hi everyone, for today's featured ship we're going to be taking a brief look at the Parthia from 1870. There is another more recent Parthia from 1947. However, this particular vessel from Cunard line had, while it wasn't the most eventful career, it was certainly a very long one. Built in 1870, this Parthia exhibited all the basic features that you would expect of ocean liners of the day. A long hull with minimal superstructure, just a couple of deck houses, 3 masts carrying a bark rig. These were auxiliary sails, so that should the steam engines break down, the sails could take over. And of course, a single funnel in those iconic Cunard colours. The Parthia's vital statistics were as follows. The ship weighed 3,167 tons, had a length of 360 feet, which equates roughly to 110 meters, a beam of 40 feet, which equates to 12 meters, and a gentle speed of 13, that is 13, knots, driven by a single propeller and initially compound steam engines, and then in the mid-1880s that was changed over to a triple expansion steam engine. The Parthia served Cunard line uneventfully, but with the rapid evolution of ocean liners, thanks to the advances of maritime technology, the ship would ultimately become just woefully outdated. And for the next 10 or so years, it would be bounced around among other owners before eventually settling down and finding a decent career serving Alaskan ports. In 1908, the company that it was running for was consumed by the Alaska Steamship Company and would remain with them for the rest of its working life. Servicing Alaskan ports, and throughout the early 20th century, the profile of the Parthia, or as it was called then, the Victoria, would gradually evolve. As you can see, more and more deck houses would be added so that the ship would have a more substantial superstructure. However, in 1924, Alaska Steamship Company took the Victoria aside and gave it a long overdue and much needed refit. This was more than just a simple scrub, spit and polish. This ended up being a complete rebuild, and Victoria emerged looking like this. Quite stunning, with a far more substantial and proper superstructure with proper deck houses and a decent profile that fits in with the early 20th century. In amongst its voyages, it was also one of the first to be used for ice cruises, and there's a rather dramatic shot of it there with some very, I'd like to think, thankful passengers, glad that they are on the ship and not on the ice floes. However, as the 1930s wore on, while the ship's hull was still in fantastic condition, the ship's machinery was not coping well. However, in the Second World War, with emergency measures needed, the crew were able to keep this ship going under wartime conditions and ensure that Alaskan ports were still serviced, even though World War II had placed huge demands on shipping and industrial capacity. But by the early 1950s, this veteran of ocean-going voyages was well and truly approaching the end of its life. But the end wasn't there just yet. The superstructure would be stripped down and the ship would be used as a lumber barge before finally Japanese scrappers bought the Victoria / Parthia and renamed the ship the Straits Maru. And in 1956, the ship was towed over to Osaka, Japan, where it was eventually scrapped, but not before a special visitor came to check out on proceedings. I'm joking. The Parthia would have a career lasting 86 years. While the Parthia may have had an uneventful career, it was most certainly long and dignified.